Inshallah, if whoever's in the hall feels like they want to settle down, that'll be nice. Whoever's outside the hall, we are starting, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, wal aqibatu lil muttaqeen, wa salatu wa salamu ala ashraf al-anbiya wal mursaleen, Sayyidina Muhammadin nabiyil alamin, amma ba'd. فقد قال الله تعالى في كتابه العزيز بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل إن كنتم تحبون الله فاتبعوني يحببكم الله ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم والله غفور رحيم وقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى أكون أحب إليه من والده وولده والناس أجمعين وكما قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. Dear brothers and sisters, first of all, it's a privilege and an honor to be taking some of the time with you all in the Seerah Intensive. Obviously, Sheikh Abdullah covers the entire Seerah. There are many subjects that are attached to the Seerah of the Prophet ﷺ that are not covered in the Seerah, because Seerah specifically refers to the life of the Prophet ﷺ, the stories in his life, actually it's just a history of his life and then the facts and the wisdoms that we can extract from it. There are other subjects that you could call like the add-ons, such as his mu'jizat, like the miracles of the Prophet ﷺ. That's not covered per se in his seerah, but there's an entire subject called i'jazun nabi, the different things that the Prophet ﷺ was able to do that were unique to him. Similarly, there is a subject that was first written about by Imam Tirmidhi rahimahullah, who was a teacher of Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, which is called the Shama'il. And many of you probably have already seen it's called Shama'il, and you probably heard it a few times. But I do know that many people have also asked, and I've heard it just by walking around, that what is Shama'il? And what is this subject? Shama'il is the plural of the word Shamla. Shamla, in simple words, refers to the mannerisms of a person, the habits of a person, the adat of a person, the personality of an individual, the way this person carries themselves, the way this person walks, the way this person talks, the way this person sits, the way this person deals with others, the way this person looks, what he eats, what he doesn't like to eat. This is not a sunnah. These are his mannerisms. These are adat. This is something that is a part of a person's temperament. And everyone can slightly shift their adat, they can slightly shift their personality, but normally some of it comes with your fitrah. And therefore, some of the things that we're going to be learning about today are not such that we're learning them for the sake of implementing it, but rather they are aspects that we learn about the Prophet's life to fulfill the ultimate goal, which is that we fall in love with him. The ultimate goal of learning seerah is not to write the facts on a paper. The ultimate objective of learning the Prophet's life is not so that we can quote certain things that we learn. Rather, the ultimate goal is تُحِبُّونَ اللَّهَ فَاتَّبِعُونِي, that we fall in love with the Prophet ﷺ. And that love sometimes can come because we've learnt about him, and sometimes can come just from one story. So many of us have been touched by one story, that one story is what got me. Like there's a story and there's many examples of this in the seerah, that one incident is all it took for the individual to be won over by the Prophet ﷺ. Just one incident. Ibn Ishaq rahimahullah mentions that more than 33 people accepted Islam just by looking at the Prophet ﷺ. Just by looking at him and being in his presence sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Another example of this is Ibn Ishaq mentions we can count more than 50 people who accepted Islam just by sitting in the gatherings of the Prophet ﷺ. Sometimes we think that words are what impact people. People are more so impacted by, we call it the vibe, right? The environment. That's what we call it. But they're impacted by how you make them feel and how you're able to, without saying a word, make them feel comfortable or uncomfortable. Sometimes we say, yo, I like that person. What did they say to you that made you like them? Nothing. They didn't say anything, but just their presence was filled with so much comfort. And hence was the reality of the Prophet ﷺ. This is called Shama'il. And in today's session, we will be covering the aspect of his physical beauty. Because in the Shama'il books, the first chapter that is covered is the physical beauty of the Prophet ﷺ. Imam Ghazali rahimahullah mentions that normally in life we love someone because of three main reasons. Three main elements that make us fall in love with someone. These are rational factors. not emotional. Because emotional love is not taught. We're born with it. We're born to love our parents. We're born to love our siblings, right? And similarly, our children are born and we just love them. Yet that love can be distanced and it can, be pulled away from us. But the natural love that is an emotional attachment will always be there for those who are certain family members. So when we say the Prophet ﷺ mentions that we need to love him to have full faith more than we even love our own children, more than we love our own families. Sometimes we hear this narration and we say that, I know it's an authentic narration, but it's something which is beyond the scope of a normal individual. It's beyond my scope. This must be the reality of the righteous people that we hear about. That's not true. Loving the Prophet ﷺ at an emotional level is a given. We all love him because he is Habib. But even at a rational level, Imam Ghazali makes the argument that even at the most rational level that an intelligent person racks their mind and brain upon, there is no one that deserves to be more loved than our Habib sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Even if you just think about it. Like no one sits there thinking like, why do I love my son for? Like, if that's what's happening, then there's a problem, right? Why do I love this person? Because it's family. If we were to think about why we love people that are not directly in that sphere or circle, there are three main reasons that we love them. The first reason, and then when the Prophet is saying this, that you love me more than your children, he's not asking for an emotional love. He's asking for a rational love. That if my son or daughter was to say something negative about our Prophet, ﷺ, we would get upset. That's us having priority of the Prophet ﷺ over even our own children. Like Umar radiyallahu anhu, at his time of Khilafah, his son says to him, "Oh father, there's too many things happening right now. The masjid expansion is going on, and there's a lot of just ruckus. Maybe it's better if we tell the woman not to come and pray in the masjid." So he's making this appeal to his father. And Umar radiyallahu anhu looks upon him and he says, "Oh son, the Prophet of Allah says very clearly, لا تمنوا أماء الله من المساجد, that you cannot prevent the sisters, the slaves, the female slaves of Allah from going to the masjid. This is the Prophet's statement. How do you want me to act against it?" The son then says, "Oh father," and he's being genuine. Because sometimes we say that we are being genuine, but us being genuine doesn't change the fact that we're still wrong. Like, I genuinely hurt you. I'm still messed up. So he was being very genuine. He says, "But oh father, like that was a different time. It was a different era." Like how we say. It was a different era, and that's why that sunnah made sense. It was a different time, that's why that worked. I urge you that even if we are unable to apply a certain sunnah that we hear about, not to go on the defensive end and act as if that sunnah has become somewhat of an anomaly or strange. Sunnah will always be relevant because relevance is attached to something that can solve our problems. Being relevant simply means that we have something that can solve a problem. That's called being relevant. I can solve a problem through my solution. The Prophet's sunnah will always be relevant. It will never become something strange, even if it's not the norm. So this concept that, it was of that time, it was of that culture, we don't need to say it. Even if we can't act upon it, it's sunnah. If we can't do it, we simply know that it's our own weakness and call it a day. It's no biggie. Everyone knows that we have flaws. It won't take away from the fact that we're good slaves of Allah. But now using sometimes someone will say a hadith and we'll say that doesn't even sound authentic. Like as if we've studied hadith sciences for 12, 13, 15, 20 years. Like that doesn't even sound authentic. Like what do I know about a hadith sounding authentic? This is why the Salaf would say when someone would refer to the Prophet's name, if we didn't know about the reality of it, we would choose tawaqquf. We would just remain silent. We just remain silent. The Prophet of Allah, and this is the reality even with elders and parents and those who are senior members in the community. This is the sunnah of it. Right? When they say something and we don't fully understand it, silence is not approval. Tawaqquf means I just won't respond right now. And that is the best thing to do at that moment. So this son, in the same generation of the Prophet ﷺ, he's not a companion. He says, "Oh father, look, it's a different time. You don't understand. It's not the same era. It's not the same country that you came from. Now we should prevent them from coming to the masjid." Right? You know how it sounds weird, like how can you say it's a different time? Don't prevent. We do the same thing to make things permissible. He's doing it to make things impermissible. So it sounds very like, oh well, he was wrong. We do it to make it permissible. The father says, I'm saying the Prophet ﷺ said, don't prevent them from coming to the masjid, and you're telling me what you think? And you are of the opinion through your speech that your statement is somehow equivalent to the Prophet's statement? I will never speak to you again. And he did hijrah from him, and he never spoke to him again. I'm telling you the Prophet said something, and you're saying you think this. Ain't gonna happen. We won't speak again. This is called loving the Prophet ﷺ and his sunnah more than we even love our own children and our own family members. And many of us have dealt with this situation, if not us, at least our parents have, who've made a change in their life. Whenever we make a slight change, there are certain distances that we create unwillingly. They just happen naturally. And when that happens, we say, well, you don't love me? So we love you, but we love the Prophet more. We love the Prophet's deen more. So if I see my son or daughter, or if you see your family members, your children or your siblings, disrespecting the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, that the Prophet's hadith is being mentioned and they're speaking over it, or the Prophet's name is being mentioned and they're not reciting durood upon it, salawat upon it, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, or a certain sunnah is being highlighted and there are some, in their demeanor, they're minimizing it or they're just completely denying its significance, as a parent, that should offend me. So I love the Prophet more than I love my children. Right? Similar to how a parent will get offended even if the teacher of that child criticizes the child. Right? A lot of you guys are parents. Some of you all are young. Like we don't have kids of that age, but we have a boarding school that we have that just a mile away. Inshallah, on Wednesday we'll go look at it. And we'll give you guys a tour of it. It's only a mile away. So we have about 180 students that live on campus, boys. It's wild. You have Detroit Zoo, then you have our school, right? It's beautiful. It's the best thing that we have. It's unique. It's barakah, it's nur, because these people give up their entire youth to learn about deen. 10 years of their life are committed, giving up their comfort, their needs, not even their desires. To be with your parents is a need, and they give it up to learn about the Prophet ﷺ, to learn deen, to become hufaz, to become scholars. So sometimes when a kid does something wrong and we have to call their parents, we call upon their parents and we say, you know what, your son did so and so. And the first response the mother or father would have is, wo mera beta nahi ho sakta. Alaysa bi ibni. It's not my son. You're talking about a different Ahmad. I said, no, Ahmad Khan, whatever, like Zayd. That's two first names. That doesn't work. But whatever, it's like, no, it can't be. I know my son. You're telling me you know my son better than me? I said, well, he's here. He did it. So I'm not saying I know him better than you. Don't gaslight me now. But all I'm saying is he did it. I don't believe it. I'll show you a camera. It can't be real. So even parents, though they love you as, the sheikh or the mufti or the person who's with them at school, the fact that you're criticizing their child will offend them to some degree. And hence, when we do correct other people's children, consider it to be such that, think of it to be such that how would you want your children to be corrected? And with that mentality, we should correct people. With that mentality, we advise. People don't mind receiving advice. They just don't like receiving advice in a manner that you wouldn't like receiving it. That's hurtful because that's very demeaning. Giving advice and receiving it is not a problem. It's the tone, it's the mannerisms, it's the flow, it's even the word. Sometimes the tone is right, but the words are wrong. Like it's just a wrong word. And it happens quite often with us because we're ultra sensitive for ourselves, but somehow ultra tolerant towards others' feelings. I don't think that would hurt them, but well, would it hurt you? Yeah. So why would it not hurt them? They're humans too. So the Prophet, this is what happens. So if we have that love for the Prophet, when someone even has any form of disrespect, it would hurt us. This is called ghira. Having a certain level of self-respect for our deen and dignity for our deen and for our Prophet. So all of this is learned through Shama'il. When we learn about his mannerisms, this is just something unique and special. How Anas ibn Malik radiyallahu anhu would say that not only was he the most beautiful person in his character, أحسنهم خلقا وخلقا. He was the most beautiful in his character, but he was also the most beautiful in his presence. Just the way Allah had created him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the three things that prove, or rather are the factors that through which we love. The first one is, first, anyone want to guess what they are? What would be a reason why we love someone other than our own family? Because these three reasons may or may not apply. Okay. Physical beauty, right? Like no one's gonna look at the house they want to purchase and say, well, the outside looks bad, but I'm sure the heart is good, right? Like, oh no, external, no, it does matter. In the sense of how we present ourselves in deen does matter. Like we're not gonna look at the food that is like presented to us in a very hideous manner and say, well, I'm sure it tastes good inside. You know how we keep saying external doesn't matter? That's not true. That's actually wrong. Internal matters more, but the external does matter. That's why we have a certain dress code in Islam. That's why we have a certain way of speaking in Islam. That is why we have a certain way of walking in Islam. We don't walk with our shoulders out and our head up like this, as if we are the focus of the earth. Like everything runs through me. Like my father would say this story to humble us at times. He still does. He says, you know this ant, like junti, an namla, an ant, when it sleeps with his legs sprawled up, like on his behind, like this. He lies down, or it lies down. And when it lies down like this, the other insects would ask the ant, like, why do you sleep like that for? Why do you sleep like this? And the ant says, well, someone has to carry the weight of the sky. Someone has to carry the weight of the sky so it doesn't fall on us. Like, well, I have to carry the weight of the world, so that's why I walk like this. If external things didn't matter, we wouldn't have Shama'il. It does matter. Every aspect of our external being is attached to the Prophet's Shama'il. We want to resemble him so that when he sees us on the Day of Judgment, he can recognize us. Just like how we recognize our children and our loved ones through features, the Prophet will recognize us through the way we carry ourselves. So the first is external beauty. Number two, anyone? What's more important? Oh, yeah, that's good. What else? That's correct, actually. Huh? Yes, number two, that's number three. Number two was internal beauty. You can have the best looking car. Like it has the right paint job, it has like the right lights, it looks the best. And then the engine is knocking, right? No one's gonna want to buy that car. It's a shell. Most people, since they make such an effort on their external presence, internally they're a shell of what they look like externally. Internally, they're hollow, and hollow people. Like your external simply impacts you. Your internal impacts people. The reason why we struggle to impact others is not because we don't have the external means. It's simply because we don't have the internal presence. That within our presence, people are impacted. Without saying much, people were accepting Islam. Because there was a presence. Internal beauty is number two. No one wants to buy a car that looks nice from the outside, but there's no engine in the inside. Right? Number three is how much that person also loves us. We love based upon, love is reciprocal. Love is reciprocal even when it comes to parents, it's reciprocal to a degree. After a certain while, like if we keep acting up as kids, our parents will say, well, you know what? Like you gotta start paying rent. Or they'll start saying things like, yo, maybe it's time for you to find a job. Or maybe it's time for you to get married. Because it's reciprocal. It's only a matter of time. Even for parents it is. The only non-reciprocal love in this world is Allah's love for us. It's non-incentivized. Because there's nothing Allah gets from our ubudiyyah. This is what we get wrong. Since we're so used to the system of a hierarchy of the corporate world, we always believe that when we do something for those who are our superiors, it actually benefits them, right? So if I do this, it benefits my manager, it benefits my boss. Allah does not benefit from our obedience, neither is He affected by our disobedience. In ahsantum, ahsantum li anfusikum. Allah says, well, if you do good, you're simply doing it for yourself. This is the qa'idah kulliyah of life. And if we can take this from today's session, it will be really beneficial. The qa'idah, this is the maxim of life. That Allah says in ahsantum, ahsantum li anfusikum. That if you do good, you're the first beneficiary of that good. And then everyone else in the world benefits. So for example, what this means is if I forgive someone, why is it a struggle to forgive people? Because we actually believe that the primary beneficiary of my forgiveness is the person being forgiven. So now we're thinking twice, why do I want to benefit them for? Why do I want to do something for them? Whereas the reality is the opposite. The Prophet says, irhamu turhamu. That you forgiving someone actually has the greatest benefit for you. Because the moment you forgive someone and I forgive someone, Allah forgives us. The cyclical nature of Allah's system continues to exist till the Day of Judgment. So for example, we see someone committing a mistake. They have a flaw. And it's an aib. It's not something which is beautiful. And they would not like it for you to mention behind their back or even in front of their face. So, well, you know what? I won't mention it because it benefits you. I won't tell anyone because if I did, you would be harmed by it. Right? That's the way we've been wired. But Allah's Prophet says, no, that's not the reality. If I hide someone's mistake, man satara aiba musliman, satarahu Allahu yawm al-qiyamah. Whoever hides the flaws of a believer, Allah hides their flaws on the Day of Judgment. Allah actually hides their flaws in the day where everyone's flaws will be on a Megatron screen. Whatever the things that they call those things in stadiums. Right? What do they call them here? Huh? Jumbotron. Oh, Megatron is a Calvin. Right? Jumbotron screens. Like, what would you do? Sometimes we think, how is it going to be possible that 20 billion people will see my deeds? Have you seen the TVs these days? Massive. Thousands of people can watch it. You have 90,000 people watching a soccer game through a screen. That's in dunya. With Allah's system, everyone will see one person's deed at a time. وَوَجَدُوا مَا عَمِلُوا حَاضِرًا. But Allah will hide the person's mistakes who hid other people's mistakes. We believe that when I give charity, guess who benefits? I hope you benefited from what I gave you. Like even that is really like, it's almost like, I'm sure you benefited from what I did for you. Like the Salaf, Imam Muhasibi rahimahullah would say, it was almost makruh within the lives of the Salaf to ask someone, what can I do for you? What can I do? Or how can I help you? That was something which was disliked because it came with a connotation of superiority. How can I help you? What can I do for you? Rather than that, they would say, is there anything that you need? Right? What are you looking for? Not what can I do for you? Because he says that I can't do anything. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. So when I say, what can I do for you? Allah will take away the tawfiq from you to even do something for that person. Because for that moment, you were under the impression that there was power within the person. And there is no power in that person. Relying upon power that is powerless is a sign of immaturity. We rely upon power that is a source, which is Allah. Right? Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakeel. So even when we give charity, the Prophet of Allah taught us an entirely different system, which was what? What happens when we give charity? Whose wealth increases? The person who gives. In ahsantum, ahsantum li anfusikum. We do something good for someone, the best way to avoid riyā and arrogance is to know that you're also benefiting from it. So it will keep you humble because you're not living with that impression that I am the doer. You're actually living with the impression that I'm a receiver as well. I'm actually benefiting from what I'm doing. So the idea of each of these qualities, going back to the three qualities that I was referring to. The first one was physical beauty. The second one was internal qualities. And the third one was how much this person also loves me. It's reciprocal, right? How much this person is ready to give up for me. I'll go backwards. There is no one, even our parents, that have given up more for us as an ummah than the Prophet ﷺ. Nobody who has expressed and proven their love for us more than our Habib sallallahu alayhi wasallam in every instant in his life, hatta that even on the Day of Judgment, rahmatan lil alameen was not confined to a time, nor was it confined to a space. That's why it's called alameen. This is similar to how Allah said, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Alameen, it works beyond space and time. So it's not like those who were close to the Prophet ﷺ were able to, they were the only people who were able to experience his rahmah. Or those who lived in his era were the only people that were able to benefit from his rahmah. That's not true. Rahmatullah alameen means that even us today, we're benefiting from his rahmah. And on the Day of Judgment, where time becomes still and it becomes a non-factor, even there, the only way that we get to Jannah is through his shafa'ah. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, in the mercy and forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So even there he's saying, ummati, ummati. In Ta'if, he said, don't crush them. The angels came and they said, well, crush these people for what they did to you. They physically and even more so mentally abused you. They said to you, could Allah not find someone better? What a hideous, demeaning thing to say to someone. I'll crush them. Just say the words. No, what if there will come a time where the progeny of the people of Ta'if will be Muslim? And when Banu Thaqif came to become Muslim, Banu Thaqif, after the Prophet's transition and demise from this world, they became Muslim in Fath Makkah, in Hajjatul Wada'. Shaykh Abdullah will talk about it, the Battle of Hunayn. But when they came to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu to do their second bay'ah, after the Prophet had left this world, they came with such a large delegation, that massive delegation. And when they came, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu said, who are you guys? The leader responded by saying, we are the people of Thaqif, people of Ta'if. And he just began to cry. So there was a time when the Prophet said that there is khair that will come from the progeny of these people. Like the Prophet could see khair from the people who completely annihilated his honor. Like literally just left him out for the ditch. Like, hey, figure it out. The Prophet told Ikramah, radiyallahu anhu, when he became a Muslim, that I knew there would be something good that comes from your father. Though his father was Abu Jahl. Like I could see something good would come. It didn't come from him, but it came from you because you became a Muslim. Like that's how much farsightedness he had for just Muslim, for people, not Muslim, just humanity. So he loves us more than anyone else. Okay? Going backwards, we're not speaking about his characteristics today because that will be for one of the other sessions. But his qualities are unmatched, whether it be his bravery. Sometimes we think about Ali radiallahu anhu, Khalid ibn Walid to be brave. Ali radiallahu anhu says, well, in the battlefield, when stuff would start going, like لَقِيَ الْقَوْمُ الْقَوْمُ, and people would start clashing their swords, and things would get rough, we would all look for shelter with the Prophet. We would all come around him. And he would be the closest to the enemy. أَقْرَبُ مِنَ الْعَدُوِ. The most brave. There was a incident where in Medina there was a noise, like a loud noise, as if there was an intruder in Madinatul Munawwara. And the Prophet and Umar radiallahu anhu says, we got up so quick. And we jumped on our horses and we were rushing towards the intruder. As we were leaving our homes in the city, the Prophet of Allah was riding back from that area. He said, halumma, halumma, relax, relax. I've already went there, checked it out. You can sleep. Like, it's all good. I already went. His bravery, his generosity, his kindness, his softness, all of that was found in him. Rather, in one statement, it is mentioned in Imam Suyuti rahimahullah's khasa'is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yujma'u khasa'is al-anbiya fihim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala consolidated and cultivated all the unique qualities of every prophet in the Prophet sallallahu, where it was said, أُعْطُوهُ خُلَقَ آدَمْ وَمَعْرِفَةَ شِيث وَخُلَّةَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ وَاسْتِسْلَامَ إِسْمَاعِيلَ وَفَصَاحَةَ صَالِحٍ وَحِكْمَةَ لُوط وَشِدَّةَ مُوسَى وَجِهَادَ يُوشَعَ وَحُبَّ دانيال وَوَقَارَ يُونُس وَطَاعَةَ إِلْيَاسَ وَحُسْنَ يُوسُف وَلَحْنَ داوود وَزُهْدَ عِيسَى عَلَيْهِمُ الصَّلَاةُ وَالسَّلَامُ. The caller made an announcement. He narrates this hadith in his book called Khasa'is al-Kubra, where there was a voice that was heard when the Prophet was born that it said, give him the character of Adam, the recognition of Sheeth, the submission of Ismail, the friendship of Ibrahim, the power and the strength of Musa, the voice of Dawood, the abstinence of Isa, the obedience of Ilyas. Give him the quality, give him, every prophet had a unique quality, give the prophet all of them. And he was hence Sayyidul Anbiya, Imamul Rusul, the leader of all prophets, because he was, Allah gave him Fadl, Tilka Rusulu, Fadlna ba'duhum ala ba'd. He gave him a sense of excellence above all other prophets through his internal characteristics. And the first one was physical beauty. Now I only have about 10 minutes left, and I'll just share maybe one narration about the physical beauty of the Prophet ﷺ, and then we'll leave it to that. The physical beauty of the Prophet ﷺ, I mentioned earlier, Ibn Ishaq says more than 33 people became Muslim just by looking at the Prophet ﷺ. So I'll give you just maybe one or two examples of this. There was a man by the name of Abdullah ibn Salam, who was a Jewish rabbi. So when the Prophet ﷺ came to Madinatul Munawwara, he says that everyone came together to welcome the Prophet. I was also there. I was just looking from a distance to kind of gauge whether or not this person really had substance, or was he just fluff, right? Like, was there something there, or was he just empty, like a shell? So I was just at a distance looking, and I came, and as I was just observing him and looking at him, I could not take my eyes off his face. And as he was sitting there, I would find myself like there was this magnetic pull being pulled in. So I'm sitting there, I continue going closer and closer and closer. Like people that have gone to like, sport games, most of us will probably buy the nosebleed tickets and somehow magically find seats all the way in the first few rows. Like Allah will give us like wahi to go there. That's a seat that is empty, right? Some people won't even buy the nosebleed tickets. They're just somehow udkhuluha bisalamin aminin. They just enter the stadium, right? So this man is just, he's so driven. The Prophet's pull is so heavy, his aura, his persona, that he just comes closer and closer till the point that he says that I'm sitting right in front of him. And the Prophet of Allah then turns towards me and he smiles. He says, are you ready? You ready? No words needed. You ready? He says, Ya Rasulullah, I'm ready. He says, I was looking at you and he said, Wallahi hadha al-wajh la yakunu wajhul kadhib. I was looking at your face and I realized that this face cannot be the face of a liar. Just can't be. Dihya Kalbi radiyallahu anhu, his name is a companion from the tribe of Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu. It was mentioned about him, Tufail ibn Amr al-Dawsi radiyallahu anhu. Tufail ibn Amr al-Dawsi, the tribe where Abu Hurairah became a Muslim from. So he entered into Mecca, and the Meccan said to him that you're a leader of a tribe, do us a favor, don't get caught up in the propaganda of this man. We've always had mainstream media make it seem like the truth was propaganda. It's not new. The social media at that time was poetry, and the Quraysh had that. So when people would come in from the external area, like the neighboring cities, so there's no influence that spreads, they would tell them, hey, don't spend time with this man. Just ignore him. He's crazy. Na'udhu billahi min dhalik. So Tufail ibn Amr said, okay, no problem. I'll just ignore him. And he's doing his tawaf, he's doing his thing, he's doing his own worship the way he's doing it. And as he's doing his tawaf, his eyes fall upon the Habib sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he's like, oh, who's that guy? And he said, هذا هو المجنون. This is the person that we were talking about. Like, you got to avoid this person. He said, really? He doesn't look like he's crazy, but just trust me, don't. So he said, no problem. So he continues listening. قُلْ جَاءَ الْحَقُّ وَزَهَقَ الْبَاطِلُ. Another maxim of life is when the truth appears, falsehood disappears. Right? The power of the truth is not that it has to be loud. It simply has to be there. Right? The truth of Gaza is not the truth because the whole world is speaking about it. It's the truth, even though it may not be the loudest voice. Because when the truth appears, even though it's not from the mainstream media, it's from people like you and I, the truth is powerful. It doesn't have to be loud. The falsehood will disappear. But it has to at least appear. It has to show up. And if it doesn't show up, falsehood will continue playing the role of the truth. Like, I'm not a person that wears watches. I just can't take this off. I haven't gone home to rip this off or cut it off. But I don't wear anything on my hands. I'm not a big fan of multiple accessories. People wear a nice misbah, tasbih on their hand. It's nice. but as long as you're using it too. But nonetheless, I don't know the difference between a real Rolex and a fake Rolex, even if you showed it to me. I won't be able to tell. But some people can. So if I had a fake Rolex on and I was like flexing it, like just like this the whole time, right? If it was fake, I would continue doing it until a brother over here lifted his qamis and he showed me a real one. You know what I would do then? I would start doing this. Just because now the fake will be exposed. You can only call a fake because you can see there's a comparison of a real one. Now you can compare it, and now the truth appears in the reality that it's in. جاء الحق وزهق الباطل. So he sees the Prophet of Allah, who is the ultimate manifestation of the truth. The example of this would be like if I enter into a gathering where people are backbiting, we are a manifestation of the truth. Allah has given us iman. So we now have the truth. If I enter into a gathering and people are backbiting and they continue to backbite, that's false. I displayed the truth. They continue to backbite, that means they don't see me as a reference of the truth yet. They don't see me to be a reference of the truth because they continue doing it. I sit in a car with someone who's listening to haram and they don't stop. That's because they don't see me to be a reference of the truth yet. Al-haq, when it appears, batil remains quiet. It stops talking. So he sees the Prophet, the truth. He said, look, I'm such an intelligent person. How will I be swooped off my feet by a person who's crazy? If it's poetry, I'm the greatest poet. If it's sorcery, I'm intelligent, I can tell. Let me give this man a shot. And he says that I go closer and I hear the Prophet ﷺ reciting Quran in one narration. I hear him reciting Khutbatul Hajjah in Alhamdulillah, Nahmaduhu wa Nasta'inuhu. And just by seeing him and hearing this, I said, this man has to be a prophet. And I accepted. There's a narration that Hassan ibn Thabit radiyallahu anhu, before he accepted Islam, he was also min al-Yahud, from the Jews of Medina. And the Jews of Medina, they were the rulers of the mainstream media in Medina. They were the religious authority in Medina. So they said to Hassan ibn Thabit that you are CNN. Allah has given you such a sharp tongue. Hassan became the poet for the Prophet later on in his life. Like he was extremely eloquent. So they say to him that, this man who is trying to take our pull away, and he's trying to overshadow us. When he walks down in this gathering where everyone is sitting, like everyone's here, when he enters the room, we want you to stand up and say something that will just take away his honor from people, tarnish his respect. Just drop a line, like pretty much like a diss track, right? Like, hey, just say something, and everyone, oh my God, man, like maybe you're right. Because people are easily manipulated, right? So he's standing there, he's waiting, he has his lines prepared in his mind. He's like, yo, I'm going to hit him like this, I'm going to throw this at him. And he's standing, waiting. And the Prophet ﷺ descends. He looks up, and whatever he had prepared in his mind, جاء الحق وزهق الباطل. It just vanishes. And he's just looking. And he says, رأيت رجل. Then he says, لما رأيت أنواره سطعت. وضعت من خيفتي كفي على بصري خوفا على بصري من حسن صورته فلست أنظره إلا على قدري روح من النور في جسم من القمر كحلية نسجت من الأنجم الزهري. He says, I'm looking at the Prophet ﷺ, and he walks down, and I say, the moment لما رأيت أنواره سطعت, the moment my eyes fell upon the anwar, the light of the Prophet ﷺ. It's like for us, the greatest example of this is when you first see the Kaaba or the Green Dome. It's overwhelming. Like even if you don't want to cry, you cry. Right? It's just so overwhelming. Imagine seeing the Prophet ﷺ in flesh with his beauty. When I saw the rays of the Prophet's face fall upon my eyes, I took my palm and I covered my eyes. I did not cover my eyes because he was not a beautiful sight to enjoy. Rather, I covered my eyes because I was overwhelmed by the light of his face. خوفا على بصري من حسن صورتي. I was afraid that if I continued looking, like it was so much beauty. فلست أنظره إلا على قدري. However, it was beautiful, so I still wanted to look. So I would look up, then I would look down. I would look up, and then I would look down. This is what Anas ibn Malik radiyallahu anhu says, that in the Prophet's gathering, us companions would be sitting, each and every one of us would be conflicted by two thoughts. Look up and gaze upon the most beautiful human being. But then he had such a presence that we would just look down. We would look up when he would look away, and we would look down when he would look at us, out of respect for him. She said, I just saw him, and from this incident, he accepted Islam. And he became the poet of the Prophet. The last narration, and we'll go for Maghrib. The Prophet on his way and his journey towards Madinatul Munawwara for migration for Hijrah, Shaykh Abdullah will cover this part, and of course in his session as well. But as he was going from Mecca to Medina, one of the stops that he had, one of like the rest stops that he had, was in the house of a woman called Ma'bad, a sister lady that was known as Ma'bad radiyallahu anha. He stops at her house, and like Shaykh Abdullah was mentioning, the Arabs were known for their hospitality, so the travelers were known that if they show up, you take them in for at least 3 days. That's their right. 3 days is their right. So there is no applause for giving someone their rights. There is simply taking away your sin. When you give someone their right, you don't applaud yourself. You relieve and alleviate sin from yourself. For example, a right of a believer is to say wa alaykum as-salam, because that's one of their 5 rights. So if I said assalamu alaikum and you said wa alaykum as-salam, like alhamdulillah, so wa alaykum as-salam. No, wa alaykum as-salam, it alleviated and relieved the sin that would have fallen upon you. And then vice versa. When someone becomes sick, it is a fard, it is their right that you visit them. So when we visit them, it's not one of those moments that we have to take a picture of, because it's very ordinary. No one thinks that when they pray Maghrib, they've reached a level of like a wali of Allah. It's fard. It's fard, right? You have to pray Maghrib. Like someone giving zakat and saying, alhamdulillah, I gave my zakat. Brother, that's your fard. You had to give your zakat. It doesn't do anyone any favors except for yourself. I have to give it. Similarly, going to someone's house to visit them when they're sick is a fard. We had to do it. So when we show up, it's a fard. It just removes sin from us. It doesn't add, of course there's a reward for it nonetheless. So when he shows up, he says, is there any food in the house? She says, no, it's a famine. Alina al-qahat. We have no food. We're stricken by a famine and there's nothing that we have. He said, well, there must be something. You must have something that I can like just eat or drink. She says, the Prophet said, well, you must have milk. And she says, I don't even have milk, but I do have an animal, like a goat, that is hazila. It's so weak and skinny that if you were to slaughter it, there would be no meat. And if you were to try to milk it, you would get nothing from it. But the Prophet says, well, you know what? Dullani ali. Show me where this animal is. So she takes the Prophet to this animal, and the Prophet with his blessed hands, the Prophet's hands were also blessed, that his touch was unique. When he would touch someone, there would be a unique effect. There's an entire chapter in the Shama'il about the Prophet's touch. Shaykh Abdullah refers to it in the Seerah intensive. It's extremely emotional and extremely enjoyable. So he touches this animal and its udders are filled with milk. He milks the animal. He gives it to Abu Bakr, he drinks. He gives it to the other person that was with him in the travel. They drink. He drinks himself. They continue to drink. And then he gives it to the people of the house. Umar radiyallahu anhu, when he heard this, all the companions knew this story because Ma'bad became a famous person in Seerah for them. They would visit her when they would come from Mecca too, later on. Like whenever they would travel to Mecca and Medina, they would try to stop over there because the Prophet stopped over there. You know the story of Abdullah ibn Umar, when he was traveling for Umrah, he would duck, right? When he would travel, he would what? In a random place, he would just what? Just duck. Like imagine someone just walking like normal and they do one of these. Like, yeah, you seeing some jinns or something? Like, what's going on? Are you all right? So the people would say to him, like, are you okay? He said, yeah, I'm okay. When the Prophet took us for Hajj, there was a tree here. And when he was traveling by this area, he didn't turn away from the tree, he simply what? Ducked. The Salaf, the Muhaddithun say, why did the Prophet not turn from the tree and duck? Because if he had turned, it would have put someone else in harm's way. So he simply ducked, and no one else behind him turned away, because if the Prophet didn't turn, I shouldn't turn either. Now there's no tree there, but this man is still, it makes no sense, but this is hub, this is love. So they would all go to Ma'bad's house. Umar radiyallahu anhu, and as Amirul Mu'mineen, he said, I drank from that same animal as a Khalifa. As a Khalifa, I drank from that, that's at least 12 years later. Because the Prophet lived in Medina for 10 years, Abu Bakr was a Khalifa for 2 years, radiyallahu anhu. For 12 years later, I drank from that same animal. So when she gave the Prophet the milk, the Prophet left, he went to Medina. The husband comes home later on in the evening and he asks the wife, how was your day, and so on and so forth. She says, today I saw something very strange. I'll end with this story. So something like, it was just different. And she explains what happened. The husband was so compelled, mesmerized by the Prophet's mannerisms, the way he spoke. His entire, this one story, I said earlier on, some people would hear one story of the Prophet ﷺ and they would accept Islam. We're here for 7 days, we will learn about his entire life. They would hear one story, and that would be enough compelling evidence that this person has to be a prophet. Hassan ibn Thabit would say, لو لم تكن له آية مبينة لكان منظره يأتيك بالخبر. What a beautiful statement. He would say, if the Prophet ﷺ, as a prophet, his entire nabuwah, if he had brought no miracles down to us, and there was no revelation, he was simply a person who sat silently upon a chair, just his mere presence would be indicative of him being a prophet, just because of how he was. So the man hears a story and he says, I'm going to go meet him to accept Islam, but how will I recognize him? How will I recognize him? Can you explain him can you tell me how he looked? She says, I can't. He says, no, please tell me something. And this, and generally I'm not going to generalize, but at times women can describe people better than men. Like if you ask a man, how did he look? Man will say he had 2 eyes, a nose, and he had ears. Like, cool. Man, aunties can kill it. You know, how do you look? Naak aisa tha uska, aankhein thodi si aisi thi, kad bhi thoda sa chota tha. Like women are really, it's a beautiful quality. They can be descriptive. Men are also very descriptive as well. She was very good at describing people. So she went on this beautiful explanation of how the Prophet looked. And for many of us, it may be the first time we actually hear about how the Prophet looked. She says, رَأَيْتُ رَجُلًا ظَاهِرَ الْوَضَاءَ مَلِيحَ الْوَجْهِ حَسُنَ الْخَلْقِ لَمْ تَعِبْهُ ثَجَلًا وَلَمْ تُزْرِي بِهِ صَعْلًا قَسِيمٌ وَسِيمٌ في عينيه دعج وفي أشفاره وطف وفي صوته صحل وفي لحيته كثاثة أكحل أزج أقرن إن صمت فعليه الوقار وإن تكلم سماه وعلاه البهاء أحلى الناس وأجملهم من بعيد وكان أحسنهم من قريب. She says, رأيت رجلا ظاهر الوضاء. I saw a man of a striking appearance. Like he just demanded my respect. مليح الوجه, beautifully created. حسن الخلق. قسيم وسيم means he was a specimen of a creation refers to every body part of his was perfectly placed. There was nothing that Allah had placed on his body that didn't look like it fit there. And then she explains that by saying that his head was not protruding. Neither was his stomach sticking out. Every part of his body was perfectly fixed. And it was as if it was designed to be that way. Hassan ibn Thabit says, وَأَحْسَنَ مِنْكَ لَمْ تَرَقَطُّ عَيْنٍ وَأَجْمَلَ مِنْكَ لَمْ تَلِدِ النِّسَاء خُلِقْتَ مُبَرَّأً مِنْ كُلِّ عَيْبٍ كَأَنَّكَ قَدْ خُلِقْتَ كَمَا تَشَاءُ. That no eye can ever see such beauty. No mother could ever give birth to such a beautiful child. Aisha radiallahu anha would say that if the people of Yusuf, if the women of Yusuf saw my Habib, they would not have cut their hands, they would have cut their hearts. If they saw his beauty, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He says that, كَأَنَّكَ قَدْ خُلِقْتَ كَمَا تَشَاءُ. Such a beautiful statement. It was as if you told Allah, oh Allah, just make me like this. Like imagine if we could be the designer of our own body. Oh Allah, do this for me. Oh Allah, do that. Oh Allah, do this. Right? That's why we're not allowed to change our body, because we don't design our body. Allah designs our body. Hence, any type of change in that body needs permission from the Creator. If I let you borrow my car, you can't change the car. It's my car. You have to ask me before you change it. Our body is Allah's amana to us. So anything that we wish to do we have to first seek Allah's permission. He says that it is as if you ask Allah to make your hands like this. Anas ibn Malik says, مَا مَسَسْتُ دِيبَاجًا ولا حريرا ألين من كف رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. I never touched any silk or cloth that was softer than the palms of the Prophet ﷺ. When we would be in pain, we would seek the Prophet's touch. His soft touch would be like the touch of a mother. Such soft palms. When he would be next to us, we would aim to steal from his fragrance. That Maymunah radiallahu anha says that I smelt the fragrance of the world. But when the Prophet would come to my home, I would collect the sweat of the Prophet ﷺ, because there was nothing that had a more beautiful scent than the sweat of the Prophet ﷺ. So every aspect of the Prophet's physical creation, it was as if he asked Allah to make him this way. Body, head. Then she says, في عينيه دعج. He had a strong contrast in his eyes. That the white was excessively white and the black was immensely black, which is a sign of beauty indeed. And he had larger eyes. في عينيه دعج. His hair would have 3 lengths. One to his ears, one to the back of his nape, and one to his shoulders. And Ali radiallahu anhu says that it would only reach his shoulders when he was in travel. So that was not the ideal state of his hair. So some people, I love growing my hair out. Just Allah has blessed me to go for Umrah quite often, so I keep going bald. When I was younger, my father would say, you have the most expensive haircut. Because I would not let him cut my hair, right? I would prefer to grow my hair out, and I would use the word sunnah, right? Like, yeah, if it's sunnah, then you should be doing this as well, right? He would use one of those cards. Like, yeah, but this is also sunnah, right? So nonetheless, growing into your shoulders for males is not impermissible, but you don't have to defend it through saying it's sunnah. It's permissible, but it's not per se a sunnah, except for when you don't have time to cut it. The Prophet ﷺ was traveling, and that's why it would grow that long. His forehead was large, which was a sign of wisdom. His mouth was wide, which was a sign of eloquence. His nose had a natural elegance to it, that it looked long from a distance, but when you were close, it looked like it was a normal size. His neck was longer, which is also a sign of beauty. Like even in the Desi culture, people speak about someone's neck. I'm like, bro, the person's neck? What does that have to do with? No, the most beautiful animals have long necks. We ain't marrying an animal. We're marrying human beings. Giraffes. They start giving you like justification. Giraffes are beautiful. Ostriches. I'm like, who's trying to marry a giraffe? This is a human being. But necks are a sign of beauty. People would wear these plates around their neck in the Persian culture to try to like make their necks longer. Which is really weird, right? But till today, because the definition of beauty doesn't change in humans. The packaging can change, but the definition doesn't change. We still see beauty for what it was at that time, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's time. So long, he had a beautiful long neck. His hands were big, they weren't small hands, so he could actually pick up stuff, and he had strength. His chest was wide, and it would extend beyond his body, but his stomach was always inside. He had broad shoulders. He had heavy bones, so he was not weak, right? He had feet that had flesh. He had fleshy feet, and he had hands that had flesh, meaning they were soft. So when he would walk, it wouldn't make that much noise. He wouldn't be a burden in you when he was in your presence. He wouldn't try to make sure that everyone knows that I entered the house. I'm here. No. He would just walk in. Of course, he would say that even when you walk into your own home, knock on the door and say salam, because surprising someone through curiosity is not permissible. Just to what? I'm just curious about what you're doing. Even your own children, it's not permissible. Even your own children. You have to knock on their door before you enter, even though they're your responsibility. But nonetheless, she continues, says, his eyes had a contrast. She says that his cheeks were naturally rosy. It was as if he had like what do you call that? What do you guys? If you guys know, it's a problem. But like he had a natural blush in his cheeks. If you guys knew about it, I would really we had to redo this whole Seerah thing again, right? A blush on his cheeks. And then she says, it was as if akhal, that his eyes always had kuhl. Though he would wear kuhl at times, but his eyes it was naturally like that. And then at the end of it, she says that if his beard was thick, his voice had an echo. It would demand your presence. The Sahaba say, when the Prophet spoke, it was as if even the birds stopped chirping. Like it was just quiet. And he would speak soft. Like you don't have to speak loud to demand presence. but just his demeanor was such. And then she says, he was the most beautiful person from a distance. You know, like when we take pictures, what do we say to people? Yeah, it's too close, man. Chill out, right? Like, what do you think? Like, you're Picasso, right? Distance. Or we say what? Take a picture from this side, or that's my better side. Some people would say this is their better side. Just a picture of my, right? Take a picture of the better side. Like, normally a car looks nice when it's far, but when it comes closer, you see the flaws of it. Oh, look, that's a dent. That's a scratch, right? You can tell. We use light. That's why the worst time to buy a car is at nighttime, because you can't see the car properly. She says, I thought he was beautiful from a distance, but the closer I came to him, he looked more beautiful. Like every time he would come closer, his beauty would increase. This was the beauty from the divine. Sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And then she says that when he would speak, it was as if everyone was quiet. And when he would stay quiet, even his silence had power in it. That when he was silent, we would also remain silent. Until Anas ibn Malik says there would be times when the Prophet would be silent and we would be like in an awkward silence. You know, awkward silence. Should we speak? Should we not speak? And we would not speak until the Prophet spoke. Like we find it to be awkward when there's silence. They found it to be awkward when everyone was speaking. Like it was okay not to be speaking. Like, you know, when you're sitting in the car with someone and there's silence, it's like, oh, this is awkward silence. No, it's not. Just do dhikr. It's perfectly fine. Just put some nasheeds on. No, it's okay. You don't always have to be speaking. The Prophet's silence was more than his speech. But nonetheless, these are a few examples of the physical beauty of the Prophet. There's so many more narrations where the companion by the name of Ja'far radiallahu anhu, the Prophet's cousin, would say that I saw the Prophet in Mecca. I saw the moon and I said, well, what's more beautiful, the moon or the Prophet? And I came to the Haram and the Prophet was praying there and he had this shawl that was red and had red lines. And I looked at the Prophet, I examined the moon. I looked at the Prophet, I examined the moon. I said, whoa, wallahi inna wajha an-nabi sallam ahsana min al-qamar. The Prophet's face is far more beautiful than the moon. This is why طلع البدر علينا. Badr, in a place that was the heat in Mecca, was a sign of not just beauty, but a sign of comfort. Because it was so hot that when the moon would come out, it would bring comfort to people. So his beauty was a comforting beauty. It wasn't an overwhelming beauty. It wasn't a beauty that would demand you to recognize him. Rather, the Prophet ﷺ would never tell people to stand for him. Right? And people would look at him in his gatherings and they would ask, who is Muhammad amongst you? Because he wouldn't ask for people's attention. May Allah allow us to fall in love with our Habib.